starting out in ordained ministry, I worked first not in a church, but as a full-time hospital chaplain. My primary placement was in the medical ICU, where somewhere around 75 to 80% of my patients were at death's door. It was deep and holy work, and I loved sitting with folks who were contemplating the whole of their lives as they were nearing the end of their time here on earth. It's been 12 years since that season of my life, and many of those faces have blended together in memory, but a few still stand out. One person I still recall vividly and with great affection is Bill. Bill was in his early 70s and he was not doing well when I first met him. I walked in, asked permission to stay, as was custom. He, of course, said yes. I sat down, asked him how he was, and he replied with heavy emphasis, "I'm blessed. I'm so blessed." Now, I was pretty seasoned by this time, and I was trained to hear denial in such over-the-top statements from folks who were physically unwell. So I kept my face open, but I recall vividly thinking about Bill with a bit of a skeptical inner eye. "It's wonderful that you feel so blessed, Bill," I replied, and I asked him to explain more of what he meant by that. "Well, God loves me, and I have this," he said, pointing to his dialysis machine. He went on, "This is such a blessing. What an amazing machine to keep me alive just a little bit longer. Maybe it was so you could come visit me." We talked for some time about his family, about his faith and his high spirits, and lack of fear about what he knew was coming. As the conversation unfolded, I was surprised and intrigued. Bill wasn't at all in denial about what was happening. He talked about his illness and his upcoming death very openly. But he was approaching things from a place that is rare, a place of deep gratitude. Deep gratitude, with sincere appreciation for the whole life that he had lived. Back then, I averaged about 10 to 12 visits a day, and this visit with Bill remains one of the most vivid and joyful that I have ever experienced. We only saw each other twice more before he died, but I was unexpectedly given a chance to spend additional time with his family a few months later at a quarterly memorial service I held for families who had lost their loved ones. When the family walked in and I learned who they were there to remember and honor, my heart leaped at the possibility of seeing them and of talking about Bill just one more time. I shared how much our visits had meant to me, and they all laughed. That was him, all right. He was always sharing his love and joy with somebody. You saw the real Bill. I think one of the reasons my time with Bill remains so vivid to me after all these years is not because his situation was particularly unique in any sort of way. I saw hundreds of patients. Many of them were on dialysis. All of them were beloved children of God, grappling with what they were facing and where life was headed. But what was unique about Bill was his perspective. It was one of deep gratitude, even in the midst of terribly sad circumstances, and that is rare. And it's similar to what Jesus encounters in our story today. Jesus cures 10 lepers, and just one of the 10, a Samaritan, of course, the cultural scapegoat for all things negative in Jesus' day, this Samaritan returns to Jesus to thank him. Jesus expresses surprise, perhaps even a hint of dismay, that only one of the 10 people he had healed returned to thank him and to give praise to God. Then he utters a cryptic and often abused saying, "Your faith has made you well." Oh, folks, okay, your faith has made you well. I imagine we've all heard this phrase, taken as, gosh, if only I pray harder, I'll be cured of my cancer, or my depression, or my heart arrhythmias. Perhaps in some of our more tender moments, we've even thought such things ourselves. It's easy to do. We have faith in God. God will be with us in that, of course. Does that necessarily mean, though, that things will always go the way we hope them to? Some Christians, so-called, would say yes. I think there's more going on here. Some scholars find the phrase, "your faith has made you well," to be a rather unfortunate translation of what Jesus was actually saying, and many suggest that a better one from Greek to English might be, "your faith has saved you." There's a big difference there. So in the hospital, working with folks like Bill, I learned a lot about the difference between healing and wholeness. Healing is what many patients and families pray for, ask chaplains and ministers to pray for too. And every time I was asked, I prayed for healing, because that is our job as ministers, as people of God, to accompany someone wherever they are in their faith. But wholeness, that's something deeper to aspire to. The process of achieving wholeness involves the naming of the thing that is wrong, and the naming of the fact that it is but one thing in the whole of someone's very full, very beautiful life. It is this process that Jesus praises in the one leper who returns to him. Not the physical healing of the leper, but the whole picture is being seen by the one who comes back and praises God and thanks Jesus. Your faith has saved you. It was wholeness, not healing, that Jesus was pointing to here, I think. Wholeness that allowed one person who had been unwell to go on and live a full life, a life of gratitude. Wholeness that allowed Bill to have a very good and peaceful death, and to be honored and remembered fondly by his family and by me. Healing is short-term. It's focused on the physical. It's focused on the issue at hand. Wholeness is eternal, and it's not bound by circumstance. Those of us who have lived full lives in this world know that healings, while they can happen, do not correlate to how faithful a person is. If it were so, Bill and a whole host of other folks I have known and loved would be alive and well today. So this passage is one that nudges us towards something else. It's towards gratitude. For those of us prone to noting the problems before our blessedness, Pastor raises hand here, I wrote in my sermon because it's true. Noting problems before blessedness, it's a helpful nudge to think about gratitude. Gratitude is indeed, to sound really trite about it, an attitude. It's a choice. This might be the message for you this morning, to look around, to take a breath, and to thank God for your life. That is a worthy takeaway from this passage. That is what the one leper does, former leper, so that they are not defined actually as a leper, but as someone whose faith has saved them. So it is important to be grateful. But that might not be your takeaway today. That is one option. But there are some times when things are so dark, when the world feels so bleak, when the cancer is too draining, when too many friends are sick, when the marriage is too broken, too painful, when the funds are low and the debt is high, when things feel so empty and dry that we cannot summon forth a word of gratitude from our lips for the situation at hand. I know I have experienced such times in my life. And I think that the Jesus who cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" from the cross gets this too. So the interpretation from this passage of just thank God all the time, in every situation, be grateful no matter what, that will make everything better, I think that message can be taken too far, and in fact can be damaging. I'd like to offer a different possible way to check out this passage. Instead of looking at how the one former leper responded and how my friend Bill responded, they're great stories, but they seem almost superhuman sometimes, right? Perhaps we can instead turn to see what Jesus does in this story. Jesus sees these poor people on the side of the road, and he heals them. He heals all of them, regardless of what they do, regardless of what they believe. Some of them were Samaritans. Some of them might have been too stunned to really believe that they had been healed. Some of them might have been truly ungrateful little cusses. We don't know. But we do know Jesus didn't care. He just healed them. And that means something. Jesus' actions towards all of them was exactly the same. Regardless of who they were and how they were behaving, he shows them mercy and kindness. They weren't on his agenda, by the way. They weren't on his census list that he had printed out at the hospital saying, I'm going to visit this person and this person and this person. He happened upon their story and upon them on the road. He was on his way doing other things. But he stopped. He saw them and he showed mercy regardless. I think Jesus does the same for us. No matter where we might be, whether things are going amazingly well and gratitude just flows from our lives, from our lips, from our way of being, if we're skipping down the road in our lives, grateful as can be, Jesus shows up to that. And if it's a slow trudge now, through the mundane, the everyday of our journey, Jesus shows up in that. When we find ourselves ill and desperate on the side of the road, calling out, Jesus, have mercy, Jesus shows us mercy. And no matter what we do, no matter if we show gratitude or not, Jesus shows us mercy. And the more we become aware of God's merciful presence with us on every step of our journey, no matter where we are, beloved of God, I tend to believe we will become more filled with gratitude, no matter what the circumstance. So it's funny, gratitude here is not something we should aim for as a pie-in-the-sky superhuman thing. It's something that slowly finds its corners in our souls and eventually does start to take over. It's not the goal for us, but it is the result. Bill's faith came as a result of a lifetime of trying to live a Christian life. The one leper who returned was equally filled with joy. But there were 9 others in the story who didn't return for whatever reason. And rather than differentiating between these two camps of people, all gratitude and no gratitude, aren't we all more of a mix? 9 times out of 10, I probably don't turn back to see God's work with enough perspective, with enough sincere gratitude. I might get it right 1 time out of 10. I know, though, that I'm more often like the 9 other lepers, forgetting to praise God and show that gratitude as much as I can. This is the kind of perspective, though, that might just nudge me a little bit more towards being more grateful for my own circumstances and more merciful towards others, more able to see those on the side of the road who also need our presence. I just, last night, so this isn't in my sermon, here you go. Just last night was blessed to be present at my 20th high school reunion. Yeah, it was very interesting. I have great memories from high school, and about 60 of us gathered last night down in Norwalk. And the memories that were sort of being flooded through that space were really beautiful. We're all exceptionally different people, living different lives in different corners of the country. But it was such an interesting moment to be able to take stock and say, oh wow, there's a lot of history here, and not all of it was good. Whose high school memories were unilaterally beautiful? But a lot of it was. And deep gratitude for being able to look back, not nostalgically either, but truly honestly, looking back, having these wonderful memories come up, and remembering that we all come from somewhere and all have grown so much since. Being able to take stock, even on our own life journeys on the road, being able to stop and find those moments can be very holy. So maybe no matter where we are on the road, we can all turn back as the leper did and give thanks to the God who shows us mercy regardless. Maybe we can try that a little more often than we usually do. Maybe we can get to 2 times out of 10 instead of 1. We won't get this right all the time. Benedictine monk David Steindl-Rast once wrote, "It is not joy that makes us grateful. It is gratitude that makes us joyful." Maybe a reminder to turn around and look for Jesus, who's always there, is what we need to foster just a little more joy in the good, in the mundane, in the difficult, and in every space in between. May we endeavor to cultivate that sense of wholeness, with an understanding that when we cannot summon it, God nevertheless responds with mercy and with a loving embrace. Thanks be to God.